He boarded the morning bus like she always did, calm, focused, and ready for another day at her dream job. But what Suzaily Mukhtar didn't know was that this ordinary commute would spiral into one of Malaysia's most haunting mysteries, one that would leave behind nothing but silence, blood, and a single unanswered question. How can a woman vanish in plain sight and end up butchered before anyone notices she's gone? Born in Kangar, Perlis, Malaysia, on June 9, 1976, Suzaily, affectionately called Susie by those closest to her, was the kind of woman people remembered. The only daughter in a loving family of 4 children, she was ambitious, intelligent, and full of promise. A graduate of De Montfort University in Leicester, England, Susie had just returned home with bright dreams and a prestigious new job as a computer engineer at Pantai Medical Center in Klang. It was everything she'd worked for. She rented a cozy home in Kampung Bujang, a quiet suburb of Kuala Lumpur, sharing it with her friend and roommate, Rosam Lisa Umar. She was engaged to a man named Rudy Sharon Abdul Rahman, a relationship cloaked in quiet privacy, perhaps too quiet. But nothing in Susie's life had ever pointed to danger. Until the morning of October 7, 2000. That day, just before 8 a.m., Susie stepped onto the Kiara Express bus. Dressed for work, her ID badge clipped to her blouse, she settled into her seat for what should have been a 40-minute ride. Other passengers climbed aboard, some nodding off, others scrolling through early morning texts. Bit by bit, they all exited, until only 2 passengers remained. Susie, and a man no one recognized, a Bangladeshi national, quiet, unassuming. But what happened next would defy logic. By the time the bus reached its final stop, only one body was found. But it wasn't Susie's. Instead, her blood was smeared across the seats, her belongings were scattered, and when investigators finally reviewed the bus's condition, it looked like a slaughterhouse. No one had seen her leave. No one heard her scream. What happened inside that moving vehicle? How does a 24-year-old woman vanish in broad daylight with passengers just feet away? And who was the stranger who shared that final ride with her? In today's episode of True Crimes Retells, we plunge deep into a case that shattered a nation's sense of safety. A case drenched in horror, contradiction, and disturbing silence. You'll hear the details police tried to piece together, the secrets that emerged from the shadows, and the theory that still chills people to this day, that Suzaily Mukhtar may have known more about her killer than anyone realized. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because every week we unravel the darkest true stories you were never meant to hear. And while you're watching, ask yourself this: how does someone vanish on a public bus and no one sees a thing? Drop your theories in the comments. We'll be reading. Now, let's begin. When the Kiara Express bus pulled away that morning, everything seemed normal on the surface. But just minutes into the ride, 34-year-old driver Hanafi Mat Hassan made a chilling decision, one that would seal Susie's fate. Instead of following his usual route toward Pantai Medical Center, Hanafi abruptly veered off course. He steered the bus into Jalan Bukit Tinggi, a quiet, less-traveled road that offered more cover and fewer eyes. For viewers who might not be familiar, Jalan simply means road in Malay, but that road name quickly became something far more sinister. Susie must have realized something wasn't right. This wasn't her stop, and this wasn't the way to work. The moment the bus left the familiar streets behind, a sense of dread would have crept in, and tragically, that instinct was right. But before we dive deeper into the horror that unfolded inside that bus, we need to talk about the man behind the wheel. Hanafi Mat Hassan wasn't just some random driver who lost control. He came with a past, one full of red flags, broken promises, and violent history. Born in Bachok, Kelantan, Hanafi was the 7th of 8 children. By the time of this incident, he had already been married 4 times, with 3 of those marriages ending in divorce. He was also the father of 3 daughters, all from previous relationships. At the time of Susie's murder, Hanafi's 4th wife was heavily pregnant, expecting their son any day. But it wasn't just failed relationships that stained his background. In 1988, Hanafi was arrested for sexually assaulting one of his ex-wives. a charge that pointed to deeply rooted violence and control. Then in 1994, he faced a criminal breach of trust charge, a serious offense involving betrayal, where someone entrusted with money or property uses it for their own gain. It's the kind of crime that shows a lack of conscience and a pattern of manipulation. But it gets darker. In 1996, Hanafi was convicted of robbery with hurt, similar to aggravated robbery. It involves violence, injury, or the use of a deadly weapon. For that crime, he served 30 months in prison and received 2 lashes with a cane, a brutal form of corporal punishment still used in parts of Malaysia. And yet, even with this violent past, even with time behind bars, somehow, this man still got hired as a public bus driver. And here's the truly disturbing part. At the time Susie boarded that bus, Hanafi had only been on the job for 10 days. Just 10 days, back in the bus. As panic set in, Susie did the only thing she could. She reached for her phone and tried to call for help, but she never got the chance to speak. Hanafi noticed. He stopped the vehicle, and that's when the nightmare began. Inside that metal cage on wheels, isolated and far from help, Susie fought for her life, but Hanafi overpowered her. In a horrifying display of violence, he sexually assaulted her, first in the front of the bus, then dragged her to the back, continuing the attack. It was brutal. It was cruel. It was premeditated. But here's the shocking twist. There were witnesses. Not everyone had gotten off the bus yet. There were still passengers on board, and at least a few of them saw what was happening, and some of them even tried to step in. In those moments, chaos erupted. It wasn't just a crime. It was a scene of confusion, fear, and screams. What exactly did the passengers do? Who were they? Could more have been done to stop this? As the horror unfolded inside that bus, it wasn't just happening in total secrecy. 18-year-old Adavon was pedaling his bike to a local tuition center, likely thinking about his studies or the day ahead. But what he saw on that quiet stretch of road would burn itself into his memory forever. Through the bus window, he spotted something no one should ever have to witness. A topless woman, visibly distressed, fighting for her life inside the moving vehicle. That woman was Susie. Sensing something was horribly wrong, Adavon got closer to the bus, and what he saw confirmed his worst fears. The driver, Hanafi, was pulling up his pants. It was the kind of image that needs no explanation. Whatever was happening on that bus, it wasn't just criminal, it was monstrous. But Adavon wasn't alone in his horror. Nearby were 3 other men on motorcycles, including a man in his 50s and a local driving school instructor. They too had seen enough to know this wasn't right. And when Hanafi tried to drive off, leaving chaos in his rearview mirror, all 4 men gave chase. The bus roared toward Taman Sri Andalas, a residential area in Klang, before turning off onto Jalan Sembau, a quieter stretch surrounded by homes and winding lanes. But Hanafi wasn't done running. After a short stop, he noticed his pursuers were catching up. Instead of surrendering or stopping the vehicle, he slammed the gear in reverse and sped back in the direction he came from, barreling down the roads like a man with nothing left to lose. Eventually, he veered off once more and drove into Bandar Bukit Tinggi, a more upscale neighborhood about 5 kilometers away. And it's there, in the shadows of manicured homes and upper-class calm, that Susie's nightmare ended, in the darkest, most brutal way imaginable. Hidden from sight, in the quiet of a secluded area, Hanafi assaulted her again. And then, when he was done, he used Susie's own hijab to strangle her. She had survived the detour. She had survived the screams. She had even survived long enough for people to notice and try to help. But in the end, she died alone, at the hands of a man who should have never been driving a public bus. After killing her, Hanafi discarded her body like garbage, throwing her naked and lifeless near a construction site. It was there that a good Samaritan, walking past, would stumble upon a sight they would never forget. Authorities were called, and Susie's body was rushed to the hospital, where forensic pathologist Dr. Halim bin Mansar performed the autopsy. What he found was devastating. Susie had suffered over 44 injuries across her body. She had a broken neck, signs of blunt force trauma, and clear evidence of sexual assault. Male DNA was recovered, which later matched her attacker. Her cause of death was ruled as strangulation and blunt force trauma. The manner of death, homicide. Soon after the examination, Susie's body was returned to her grieving family and laid to rest in her hometown of Kangar, the same town where she had once dreamed of doing great things, now burying her far too soon. Meanwhile, the investigation moved fast. With eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and an outpouring of public shock, police began tracking down the man responsible. 3 days later, they found him, Hanafi Mad Hassan, hiding in plain sight at the North Klang bus terminal. His arrest marked the beginning of a high-profile legal battle, but also raised chilling questions about how this could have been prevented. Let's be clear, the crimes didn't take place in some remote rural village. These neighborhoods were urban, busy, and filled with people. Cars, bikes, pedestrians, all passing by. So while those 4 brave men chased the bus, they weren't the only ones who may have seen something that day. In fact, by the time the investigation concluded, over 55 witnesses were summoned to testify in court. And here's where things take a disturbing psychological turn. Hanafi confessed, completely. He told investigators everything, how he'd assaulted Susie, how he'd strangled her, even led police to the exact spot where he'd thrown her purse into a storm drain. When they searched the drain, they found her purse and personal documents still inside. But when asked why he did it, his answer chilled everyone in the room. I couldn't resist. She was too beautiful. That was his reason. Even more tragic, on the same day Hanafi murdered Susie, his pregnant wife went into early labor. Their child, a baby boy, died that same day, just hours before Hanafi was arrested. It was as though the universe itself recoiled at what he had done. He was remanded into custody, and prosecutors moved quickly. He was set to be formally charged on November 1st, 2000. And in Malaysia, as we've seen in previous episodes like the Kan Yong case, murder carries a mandatory death sentence. On top of that, sexual assault charges can carry up to 20 years in prison, plus the brutal punishment of caning. But in a final repulsive act of defiance, when the charges were officially read in court, Hanafi pled not guilty. And according to those in the room that day, he smirked. After the horror that unfolded on that bus, the road to justice would be long, but not silent. On March 12, 2001, nearly a year and a half after Susie's brutal murder, the trial of Hanafi Mad Hassan began at the Shah Alam High Court. It would stretch on for 65 days, a slow, grueling journey through graphic evidence, witness testimony, and a defense so flimsy, even his own lawyers began to distance themselves from him. The evidence stacked against Hanafi was overwhelming. Blood traces, DNA, passenger testimonies, surveillance inconsistencies. It painted a picture far too clear to ignore and far too sickening to forget. But when it came time for Hanafi to speak in his own defense, he did what many guilty men do. He lied. Taking the stand, he spun an absurd story, one that didn't just insult the intelligence of the court, but tried to erase Susie altogether. He claimed that yes, Susie had boarded his bus that morning, but she got off safely at her usual stop near the medical center. According to him, the real issue came after that. He told the court that a friend had boarded as his last passenger, and while they were deep in conversation, he almost ran over a cyclist named A. Devon, a man who had already testified against him earlier in the trial. Conveniently, Hanafi claimed that after nearly hitting Devon, a group of men armed with sticks and iron rods began chasing the bus, forcing him to speed away for his own safety. But there was one glaring hole in his version of events. Actually, several. First, why was his DNA found on Susie's body? Second, why was her blood discovered inside the bus? And third, why did no CCTV support his account? The court didn't buy it. No one did. And on April 26, 2002, Justice Maud Hishamuddin Maud Yunus delivered the verdict. Hanafi, then 36 years old, was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. For the sexual assault, he received a 20-year prison sentence and 12 lashes of the cane. a punishment that, in Malaysia, is carried out with a heavy rattan rod and leaves permanent scars. In the courtroom that day were Susie's brother, Muhammad Muharis, and her close friend, Shaheen Abdul Wahid. They listened as Justice finally spoke, and though nothing could bring Susie back, both said they were satisfied with the outcome. But Hanafi wasn't ready to accept his fate. He filed an appeal, hoping to escape the gallows. It was rejected on August 13, 2005. Still desperate, he took his case to the Federal Court of Malaysia. That court also upheld his sentence on December 12, 2006. Then, in a final plea, he turned to the Sultan of Selangor, begging for a royal pardon. That too was denied. What happened next was unusual. Even members of Hanafi's own family turned away from him. His 80-year-old mother, devastated but honest, told reporters that she supported the court's ruling and apologized to Susie's family for the suffering her son had caused. Her words were simple but powerful. No one is above the law. Even one of his ex-wives, a woman who had shared years of her life with him, asked for the sentence to be carried out swiftly, not out of vengeance, but for the sake of their children, who she feared would one day learn the full truth about their father. On December 19, 2008, inside the Kajang prison, the sentence was finally executed. Hanafi, Mat Hassan, was hanged at dawn. After a routine autopsy at Kajang Hospital, his body was returned to his family and buried at the Kampung Kuberdado Cemetery in Bachok, Kelantan. Susie's loved ones, upon hearing the news, felt a quiet, bittersweet relief. Her father, Mukhtar Ibrahim, said he never forgave Hanafi for what he had done, but he also expressed sympathy for the innocent family left behind. Still, justice had spoken. Years later, Malaysia would grapple with whether the death penalty should even continue to exist. In 2022, a national debate reignited over the abolition of mandatory death sentences. Susie's murder, along with that of infamous serial killer Ahmad Najib Aris and so-called singing witch Mona Fandi, was referenced during these debates as examples of crimes so vile they demanded the ultimate penalty. In April 2023, Malaysia officially approved the abolition of mandatory death sentences. As of today, in 2025, crimes like murder, drug trafficking, and terrorism can still carry the death penalty, but judges now have the option to impose 30 to 40 years in prison, caning, or life sentences instead. But Susie's case wasn't just a headline. It was a national reckoning. After her murder, Malaysians were horrified by how easily something so violent could happen in a public space. Lawmakers proposed a complete redesign of public buses, including larger windows to increase visibility and discourage such crimes. There were also new policies to screen bus drivers more thoroughly and prevent those with violent criminal records from getting behind the wheel again. Susie became known as Malaysia's Nirbhaya, a name borrowed from the victim of the 2012 Delhi gang rape in India. Both cases shocked their nations. Both sparked calls for change. Both left a permanent scar. But Susie wasn't the only victim. In the very same month Susie was murdered, another child's body was found. 5-year-old Nurul Shuhada Barak. She had been sexually assaulted, killed, and dumped in a rooftop water tank. Her attacker? A 12-year-old neighbor. Sadly, little else is known about her case. And then, in September 2007, 8-year-old Nurin Jazlin was discovered in the most chilling way. Stuffed inside a gym bag, left outside a shop in Petaling Jaya. She had been dead for hours. Autopsy reports revealed unimaginable abuse. She had suffered a severe bacterial infection after being assaulted with foreign objects, injuries so brutal that they caused her bowels to rupture. Her body was so badly damaged that her parents couldn't even recognize her. DNA had to confirm her identity. To make matters worse, the family received cruel prank calls, with strangers pretending Nurin was still alive. These weren't just isolated tragedies. They were warnings. Warnings that society could no longer afford to ignore the systemic failures that allowed these crimes to happen. Susie's murder may have been the flashpoint, but it was far from the only cry for help. And in the eyes of many Malaysians, justice wasn't just about punishing one man. It was about protecting every daughter, every sister, every child from becoming the next name on a news report. It was just a normal evening, August 16th, 2007, when 8-year-old Nurin Jazlin left home to visit the neighborhood night market in Wangsa Maju, Kuala Lumpur. She had only one goal, to buy a hair clip. She never came back. What began as an innocent errand quickly turned into one of Malaysia's most disturbing and unforgettable crimes, one that would haunt an entire nation and leave behind questions no one could answer. When Nurin didn't return home that evening, her parents, Nur Jazimin Abdul Jalil and Nurazian Bistamam, reported her missing. At first, people thought maybe she had wandered off. Maybe she'd be back in the morning. But deep down, her parents knew something wasn't right. A storm of panic had already begun to settle over their home. The community reacted fast. The media, NGOs, and concerned citizens rallied to help. Nurin's face appeared everywhere, on flyers, posters, and breaking news reports. It became the face of every parent's worst nightmare. But despite all efforts, Nurin was nowhere to be found. Then came the footage. Weeks later, police recovered CCTV footage from the night of her disappearance. The grainy video showed something straight out of a horror movie. Nurin being forced into a white van, dragged, taken, gone. The video shook the country to its core. Suddenly, this wasn't just a missing persons case. It was the abduction of a child in cold blood, caught on camera. Citizens across Malaysia labeled it the most horrifying crime in years. And they weren't exaggerating. The horror and outrage grew so intense that then Prime Minister Abdullah Ahmad Badawi considered a major shift in national policy. He proposed publicly releasing the names of all known sex offenders, especially those who had harmed children. At the time, Malaysia had no centralized child predator registry, unlike some countries. There was no easy way for schools, parents, or child care centers to screen who they were hiring. And even though plans were announced in 2019 to finally roll out a child offender registry, it never fully materialized. As of now, even in 2025, no accessible nationwide registry is available online. The promise remains broken, and families are left in the dark. But then, something unexpected happened, a twist that sparked a fierce debate. While the hunt for Nurin's abductor continued, some public officials turned their attention in the wrong direction: her parents. Malaysia's Inspector General of Police, Musa Hassan, and several others floated the idea of charging Nurin's parents with negligence under Section 33 of the 2001 Child Act, which deals with failure to supervise a child. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Many felt this was a heartless, misdirected attempt to shift blame. Lee Lam Tai, chairman of the Malaysian Crime Prevention Foundation, publicly condemned the idea, arguing that punishing the grieving parents would be cruel and deeply unjust. And he wasn't alone. Ordinary citizens were furious. Why were the victims suddenly being treated like suspects? Meanwhile, investigators made several arrests, 5 in total. On September 27, 2007, federal agents raided a property in Shah Alam, detaining 4 men and 1 woman, all aged between 27 and 35. But within just a few days, all were released. The woman was let go after questioning. The men were supposed to be held for 7 days, but they walked free after just 3. Lack of evidence. No charges filed. No closer to justice. Just a few days later, on October 2nd, police arrested an Indonesian woman at a market who panicked and attempted to swallow a SIM card when approached. Another lead gone cold. Then came the reward. Desperate for answers, the police announced a 10,000 ringgit reward for any information leading to Nurin's killer. An anonymous businessman matched the offer, raising the total to 20,000 ringgit. Still, no new information emerged. But on October 11th, there was finally a glimmer of hope. Police uncovered CCTV footage from the parking lot where Nurin's body had been dumped, inside a sports bag, left in front of a shop just weeks after she vanished. The tape was grainy, unclear, but it held clues. In the first clip, recorded around 1 p.m. on September 16th, a motorcyclist was seen dropping the bag. An hour later, a woman wandered into the scene, appearing lost. She was picked up by 3 men who arrived in a car. The footage was sent to the FBI in the United States for enhancement. Authorities hoped it would reveal a face, or at least a license plate. But even with the FBI's technology, they couldn't make out either. The trail went cold again. On September 21st, just 5 days after the bag was discovered, Nurin Jazlin was laid to rest. Her tiny body was buried at the Taman Ibu Kota Muslim cemetery following the afternoon prayer. The grief was overwhelming. Years passed. In 2018, Nurin's father once again pleaded with authorities to reopen the case, urging them to apply the latest technology, fresh forensic tools, new DNA analysis, anything to find out what happened to his daughter. But as of this recording, in April 2025, no one has ever been convicted of Nurin's murder. The killer, or killers, are still out there. Now, we want to address something that often comes up when we cover cases like this, especially for our viewers who may not be familiar with Malaysia. After diving into stories like this, or the Mona Fandi case, or the Kaniong tragedy, you might get the impression that Malaysia is a dangerous place. But the truth is, that's far from reality. When we visited Malaysia, we actually found it to be one of the safest countries we've ever been to. The police presence is noticeable, but it's not intimidating. It's calm, structured, and reassuring. Private security guards are stationed outside most buildings, from hotels to elevators, and they're often unarmed. They're there to help, not to frighten. It felt safe. It felt orderly. Even the public and private healthcare system was surprisingly efficient, far more affordable than what many of us are used to. We're talking high-quality care at a fraction of the cost. In fact, many people travel to Malaysia for that exact reason. The strong healthcare infrastructure, the value of the US dollar, and the ability to access specialists on the same day. It's why we were there in the first place. So while the crimes we cover here on True Crimes Retells are deeply unsettling, they don't define a country. Malaysia is not lawless, and its people are not indifferent. Still, it's worth noting that until 2023, Malaysia had a mandatory death penalty for murder. But that has since changed. Now, depending on the case, the punishment ranges from 30 to 40 years in prison with corporal punishment, like lashes, or death, but only in extreme circumstances. Some argue life in a Southeast Asian prison might be even worse than the death penalty itself. What do you think? Should the death penalty still apply in cases like Nurin's? It's been nearly 2 decades since Nurin Jazlin vanished into the night, her innocent footsteps swallowed by the shadows of a city that never saw her coming and barely saw her leave. And yet even now, the most haunting part isn't the brutality she suffered, heartbreaking as it was. It's the silence that followed, the silence from her killer, the silence from the system, the silence that settles in when a child is buried, but the questions are not. A SIM card swallowed, a van that disappeared, a motorcyclist with no face. So many moments that felt like the one, like justice was just around the corner, only to slip through our fingers again. And what about her parents, the ones who carried the guilt for years they didn't deserve? Imagine grieving your child, and then being threatened with prison for not protecting them, as if the pain of loss wasn't punishment enough. It's a story that refuses to rest. Because behind every unanswered question is the same chilling truth. The person who did this may still be out there, walking past children, sitting on buses, living quietly, unpunished. So we ask you, do you think this case will ever be solved? Do you think someone, somewhere, still knows something? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Maybe someone will say something that triggers a memory. Maybe someone watching this will remember a detail, or maybe, just maybe, the story being told again, loudly, will stop the next one from happening. That's what being a retell is about. Not just watching, not just listening, but refusing to let these stories vanish like their victims did. Because when we keep talking, when we share these stories, when we give a name and a face to the forgotten, we're doing more than revisiting tragedy. We're holding the line. We're making sure the darkness doesn't get to write the last word. So if this story gripped you, if it shook you, if it made you angry or made you care, don't let it end here. Like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case. We drop new deep dives every single week here on True Crimes Retells, stories the world tried to forget, but we won't let them. And remember, the more people hear these stories, the harder it becomes for monsters to hide in silence. Be a Rattel. Keep fighting the quiet. Until next time.